I spent years in the studio with hardware compressors before software eventually got good at emulating classic compressors of the 60s, 70s, and 80s. Even so, I still preferred hardware when available for sessions and final mixes. Between the rental or purchase price tag and possible repair cost of hardware gear, software became more practical and therefore more common on studio and live projects. Hardware compression, in reality or fantasy, still has a quality that I overly romanticize. For better or for worse, the love affair with audio production of the 80s and 90s drives a lot of my purchase decisions and has often steered me away from software options. If physical space and actual income weren't a concern, software would have no foothold in my setup. But I can't deny that some things are possible with software that hardware just cannot achieve. To my knowledge, there's no equivalent to Aberrant DSP's ShapeShifter character compressor that exists in the hardware realm. Transparency isn't this plugin's main goal, though you can dial that in if you like. It can be subtle, but it really shines when it's used as it was intended, to inject tone and depth, warmth, and unforeseen results on the source material you feed into it. When the compressor functionality is bypassed, ShapeShifter is a versatile drive processor that can add heavy, harsh distortion or just a touch of sneaky, thickened input saturation. Even order harmonics spice the distortion to taste by way of the asymmetry control knob. Selecting drive type A or type B can conjure fuzzy, overdriven distortions that offer plenty of options while processing guitar. Or bass. I dig that the compressor can have the left-right channels trigger compression independently or be a stereo sum average to set off compression. That's a feature I like to use on the mix bus, so I'm glad it's here. Useful for the mix bus, but also for individual and subgroup buses, is the wet-dry control. Blending the original signal path with the process compression is something I wish all compressors had, software and hardware. What makes this plugin stand out is the implementation of downward compression and upward compression with a single threshold. Everything above the threshold activates downward compression, taming the decibels from unruly loudness, as set by the transients ratio. Input below the threshold gets upward compression in accordance with the ratio control to increase gain output. The floor control is essentially a bottom threshold to determine where the upward compression ratio is not applied. Below the floor, and input signal is not affected by the ratio control. This is not expanding or gating sound below the floor, as expanding actively pushes a signal lower in volume until it's gated or cut off. Attack and release are what one would expect on a compressor: 0.2 milliseconds to 200 millisecond attack time, and 20 millisecond to 2-second release time. There is a tone control to boost the low band or high band compressor levels. My assumption is this control is after the compression has happened, but the instruction manual is unclear on this. There is no indication what frequencies are being boosted as the control moves left to boost low band or right to boost high band. It would be handy to know what's being adjusted in real time like the other controls display. A defeat switch for tone control would also be very useful. So, how much character can be squeezed out of Aberrant DSP's ShapeShifter? There are plenty of sound palettes to mess around with using the presets as jumping off points. Subtle to mangled results are simple to create with this plugin since you can mess with the noise floor, you can tame loud signals, you could accentuate room noise with upward compression, drive grit into the crevices, distort the air, drown sound in mud, make chest cavities thud with punchy bass, and generally make beautiful music and thought-shredding anarchy. You get the idea. ShapeShifter isn't emulating anything, and it isn't demanding that you polish sound in a mainstream method. It does what it does extremely well. It lets you explore and create dynamics that make unique sonics. It can be vanilla if that's what you like. You don't have to go crazy, but crazy and unexpected is where ShapeShifter shines. I would like to see the user interface become resizable to better utilize screen space on my laptop, but that's nitpicking. I do that sometimes. The grouping of the controls is logical in my head, and the metering is fantastic. It's just spaced apart more than I prefer. But again, I grew up on hardware dynamic processors that had to fit into 19-inch rack spaces, so yeah, that was a thing. Let's call it a variation on the theme of compressed dynamics. And at the time of this video upload, it's only $20. I had no problem spending my money on this plugin, especially after all the enjoyment I got from Sketch Cassette, Aberrant DSP's other plugin with degradation in mind. Since I purchased ShapeShifter 2 weeks ago, I've spent more time in Logic Pro just investigating the possible combinations of remodeled dynamics, and my rack hardware has definitely noticed.